Hey, DickHeads! Like a pink laser beam of truth beaming from San Diego, California, straight to your brain hole. We have a review of Total Recall. You will have to decide when it's over. Was it real or implanted in your brain by this podcast? So, today we're talking about Total Recall, which started as a short story called
We Can Remember It For You Wholesale, published in 1965.
Yes, and this story won the Nebula Award. I don't believe this was Dick's first awards because he won a bunch of awards for Man in the High Castle. But yes, this is an award-winning short story. And when I say short story, the emphasis there is short. It is a very short story. About how many pages is it, Anthony?
Let's see, it's about 17 pages long.
Okay. Anthony and Larry both read this today. I guess we didn't introduce ourselves. We should introduce ourselves. I'm David Agranoff.
I'm Anthony Trevino.
And Langhorn.
Jay Tweed.
Yes. And we're your hosts for this podcast. So we're going to be talking about this short story now. First, this is definitely one of the most celebrated short stories of Philip K. Dick's, but it's weird because it is so short, and it comes...
17 pages not that short. It's not microfiction.
Yeah. The funny thing is, I remember before we did Minority Report, I remember that story as being shorter, and this one as being longer, when it was the opposite. Minority Report was quite a bit longer.
Much longer.
Yeah. We Can Remember It For You Wholesale was originally published in the magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction, which is, pretty much the top of the line market. So this was a pretty big deal for PKD, considering where it was published and the reaction that he got. And I believe, he sold the film rights to this pre-Blade Runner. Dan O'Bannon and Ronald Shusett.
I don't know. Someone correct us on social media about the proper way to say this name.
Yeah, they were working on a script for Total Recall before they even did Alien. They were halfway through the screenplay for this and decided to write a monster movie, and they wrote Alien. So this team, two pretty classic works of science fiction there.
That little-known movie, Alien?
A little movie that could. This story starts off with a awesome opening line. I believe, Anthony, you can read us this opening line?
Yeah, the opening line of the story is great. He awoke and wanted Mars.
Nice.
Right to the point.
Right to that point of not wanting to live on Earth. But do you guys think Philip K. Dick really wanted to live on a different planet?
Well, it sure seems like it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Almost every novel and story around this era ends with somebody some idealized trip to a colony world or off-world.
Off-planet somewhere.
Yeah. He really had the idea that other planets were better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think the science backs that up as far as the ability for human beings to survive. But anyways, We Can Remember It For You Wholesale is the story of Douglas Quayle, who is a secretary, kind of just like middle management.
He's a
clerk.
Yeah.
He's like a government clerk.
And he has this idea that he really wants to go to Mars. That's pretty expensive, going to Mars. So he sees an ad in a taxi. Before we get into this, is different from the movie, but the taxis have they have an automatic taxi thing going on too. And there's we really enjoyed how the taxi says hello to you. It says, "Hello, sir or madam."
No matter who you are.
No matter who you are.
Which I thought was nice. It showed a little forward thinking on Dick's part. Of course, then he talks about boobies, which is not.
There's a really great line in here towards the end where when he goes back to recall. Let us not forget where she says, "Mr. Quayle," the girl said, "although you are a minor clerk, you are a good-looking man, and it spoils your features to become angry. If it would make you feel any better, I might let you take me out." Ridiculous.
Quayle wants to go to Mars. He can't afford it, so he sees this ad for Recall Incorporated, and it's spelled Recal, like R-E-K-A-L Incorporated. I don't remember. Was it spelled that way in the movie?
Yeah, it's Recall with a K.
Yeah, Recall with it, yeah. I mean, I just watched the movie, so I should remember that. Yeah, so once he gets there, this is the scene where they talk about, so basically what happens is at Recall and we're going to assume that you read this, if you haven't read the story, you've seen the movie, you have an idea of the concept. The scene that is the most like the movie in the book, or where they're the same, is his visit to Recall, where he has everything explained to him, and that they're going to implant these memories of this trip to Mars, and they're going to give him artifacts and things to make it seem real, like IDs, photos, those kinds of things.
Little artifacts that he can find later on that have been planted in his apartment, or what they call the conapt. Yeah.
And so I underlined a line where it says...
Was that a combination of condo and apartment?
I'm imagining it is.
It doesn't really say too much about the apartment in the story. But there's a line here, and I underlined it. It says, part of the package we offer is such deep implantation of recall that nothing is forgotten. And I think that's really key and important to the concept. So the concept is you're going to believe that this thing really happened to you. We're going to make sure that you believe it. We're going to have these physical items that are going to add to the story and to the concept. And then I thought it was interesting, too, on that page that McLean, he's the guy who's selling the recall. He says, you're not accepting second best. The actual memory has all kinds of vagueness. He says, with all its vagueness and omissions and ellipses, not to say distortions, they're second best. So he kind of implants the idea that recall is selling that our memories are better than the real ones. And
it's a good pitch.
Yeah. Because it's true, you don't always remember every detail of things, and if they're engineering your details, then you're going to know more. And here's the thing that makes that really interesting, is because if they're implanting memories in you, that also sets up the question marks when we get to the what is real stuff. And because they have such control and can make your memories so firm. So basically, he once they start trying to implant memories, they discover that there's no space there to implant the memories because there's already some memories of Mars that exist in his brain. They've just been suppressed. And the concept for the whole movie is right there too.
Yeah.
And from there, we get this idea where they basically come up with this whole like funky concept of, in order to supplant that, we're going to come up with a more interesting memory.
Right. Well, I think though he goes into it because he feels his life is dull and boring and drab because he's a mid-management government stooge, like PKD always do. And
but he sort of goes against that.
How
when
so?
He introduces this character that's super drab and everything, but then
turns out to not be such a dweebus.
Right.
Yeah.
He's a secret agent.
He is a secret agent. So they implant these memories. The whole thing starts, they realize they can't give him the memories right because he starts saying what had already happened when he's kind of half under anesthesia.
Mm-hmm. And so at that point, they send him home saying, like...
And he's real upset about it.
He
feels ripped off.
He's like, wait, I didn't...
He's even going to go to the Better Business Bureau.
Yeah, he's going to write an angry Yelp review about Recall Incorporated.
He seriously is.
And,
yeah, he is.
And he goes back, and then what happens?
First his wife leaves him because he keeps asking her questions about, did I go to Mars or didn't I go to Mars? Because he has these conflicting memories grafted onto his mind, and she gets fed up and tired of him, and I think, and she bails because clearly she doesn't like him.
That's the weakest part of the story, in my opinion.
It's also one of the more different aspects of the story when compared to the movie, but we'll get there.
Yeah.
And two guys are in his apartment waiting to, basically, I think they're trying to arrest him.
Yeah, they want to arrest him. And eventually they're going to kill him. They just don't want to kill him right there.
Right, and he escapes, and through the best part of the book for me is he realizes they can read his thoughts, but then he starts trying to talk to himself in hopes that somebody will hear him. They hear him, they make a deal, and he agrees to meet them back at recall.
Yeah, he implants it where he wants them to go. And yeah, and so then they come up with this plan of implanting an even more exciting past in his mind.
An utterly ridiculous.
An utterly insane one where he saved the entire Earth from invasion.
An alien invasion.
And that's why they have to give him this other identity to protect him, because the aliens would come back. They'll come back as soon as he's dead, like if he's dead or... And here's the funny thing, is eventually he's going to die. So if this was reality, like, you know...
But then the same thing happens again. He starts saying things that relate to the memory they're going to implant in him, and everyone realizes that it's much
this whole
like...
alien fantasy
Yeah.
is actually real.
And I think Larry said it best. The whole story is basically just a joke, right?
It's one long joke.
Yeah.
With the punchline being the most ridiculous part turns out to be true.
Yeah. And so... Yeah, and basically the whole story is a gag that builds on the idea that you can't trust your memories if they have the ability to create memories for you. And so that's the whole idea of we can remember it for you wholesale.
It's a fantastic story.
Yeah, it's a really cool story for the short amount of time, that the short pages. There's a lot of cool ideas. And what's really neat about it is you can see how it inspired a movie where they took the idea and blew it out into all kinds of other things. And so there is really great potential for a movie that came out of this short story. And a lot of the short stories have been turned into PKD movies, even, the good ones, the bad ones.
The Minority Reports.
The Paycheck. Even. Yeah, great concepts that can be blown out, and to the degree of which they're turned into good movies or bad movies are, all in the execution. But, the foundation is here in this short story. It's a great short story. You can see why it won the Nebula Award for Best Short Story. And, yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, it's awesome. And it really only kind of comprises the first maybe 20 minutes of the movie.
Right, well, the concept, that he's been to Mars, that's all there for the rest of the movie. But you're right, it is basically just the
first 20 or so minutes.
And then it blows out into an action extravaganza.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
So let's talk about some fun moments in the short story. I have a few scenes that I highlighted. Do you guys have anything too, or
No, go for it. Let's see what we got.
So he goes to the police. You remember, the policeman said, your trip to Mars. We know all your actions today and all your thoughts. In particular, your very important thoughts on the trip home from Recall Incorporated. We have a teletransmitter wired within your skull, and it keeps us constantly informed. That's the part we were talking about earlier, where they're reading his thoughts. And I liked how now this is why I pointed it out. This is some of the pseudoscience that we talk about.
What do we call it on this podcast?
The
wackadoo science.
Yeah.
Dick's wackadoo science. Someone, when we become a bigger podcast, make that a t-shirt.
Right.
Yeah. Dick's wackadoo science. A telepathic transmitter with the use of a living plasma had been discovered on Luna. He shuddered with self-aversion, the thing inside him within his own brain, feeding twice. Here's what's funny to me. There's living plasma on the moon.
Right.
Right? That they put in your brain, and I love the line, feeding, listening, feeding. So he's really obsessed with the idea that it's feeding off of you, so it gets your thoughts by feeding. I thought that was really interesting. On the same page, there's also... But... I don't know. I mean, like, the whole idea that there's, like, living plasma on the moon is goofy enough. But but the idea that they're just sticking it in your brain...
But remember, we hadn't been to the moon.
That's true. We were pretty close there. This was 1965 when this story came out. Yeah.
I have a part in here that I thought was kind of funny. So it's when they're trying to kind of discuss what memory, like, when he's trying to bargain for what memories they could re-implant in him so he forgets about the whole thing. And he says, Try it, he said desperately. Get some of your top-notch military psychiatrists. Explore my mind. Find out what my most expensive daydream is. He tried to think. Women, he said. Thousands of them, like Don Juan had. An interplanetary playboy. A mistress in every city on Earth, Luna and Mars. Only I gave that up out of exhaustion. Please, he begged. Try it. Well, this guy sucks.
He's talking about James T. Kirk.
Yeah, right? He basically wants to be captain of the Enterprise.
Yeah, exactly.
Did I get that right?
Yeah, the Enterprise?
Yes.
Yeah. Good tracking there, bud.
Yeah.
He wants to be captain of the Star Warses.
So there's some fun on the next page over. There's some funny little like throwaway lines of different technology and things. He talks about some bodyguards armed with sneaky Pete guns.
Oh yeah. Does anybody know what those are?
Yeah, what the fuck?
Oh,
are
I wanted to look that up. I think a sneaky Pete is actually a thing.
I think you're right. I'll look it up.
Okay, so yeah, that was interesting. So there's a line here where in an instant he had possession of the gun, covering the other, so he gets the gun. I'm not sure if so that they're trained over all these years to use it, but he just picks it up. He talks about Quayle like going into a crowd to hide, and he says a mob of peds, which is funny, hurrying along the runnels. I don't know if you noticed that. But
Yeah.
So
yeah,
sneaky...
well, he uses runnels like 3 times in this story.
So a sneaky Pete gun is basically what kind of just looks like a Glock. I don't know enough about guns to know what the differences are, but it's pretty much just a pistol.
It's like a small pistol.
It's got a really dumb name though.
Okay. On a park bench alone, he sat dully watching a flock of perverts.
Whoa!
Wait, flock of perts.
Wait a minute, David.
Wait. Sorry.
A flock of perverts.
Oops. A flock of perts, a semi-bird imported from Mars' 2 moons capable of soaring flight, even against Earth's huge gravity. The idea that there were birds that lived not on 1 but 2 moons, the same bird lived on 2 different moons of Mars, is pretty shitty science, too.
Do the perverts live on Mars too, David?
Sorry. Perts. Yes.
A flock of perverts.
Flock of perverts. Well, that has to do with the part you were reading. But
That makes sense.
yeah, so the science of the idea that there were birds from 2 different moons of Mars. I mean, the fact I don't think Phobos has anything close to an atmosphere. So
what you're telling me is there's no birds on.
there's no well,
As far as we know.
as far as we know, there's no birds on Mars, and it's kind of a ridiculous concept. But I enjoyed that. Yeah, that was another thing that was weird. And then,
Did you think?
Go
Okay,
ahead.
which one did you want to do at the end after you finished the story? Did you want to give the story a rim shot or a sad trombone?
I think you meant rim job, or did you really wait?
No, rim shot. I did not mean rim job, and not rusty trombone.
I'm on the wrong podcast.
Did you want to give it a rim shot? Ba-dum-bum, or did you want to give it the sad trombone? Wah wah wah.
Well,
I'm going with sad trombone.
See, I would have. I want to give it a rim shot because I thought it was a great joke.
Meh.
yeah, I'm definitely hitting the drums for this. I think it's a good story. I think the part with the alien invasion was super weird.
But it's supposed to be so outlandish that it would never happen. That's
Right.
sort of what makes it funny is that, they've already uncovered he's a secret agent, but then to come to find out that he's also the protector of the entire planet
Yeah.
is pretty ridiculous.
So in that line it says, your fantasy is this: you are 9 years old, walking alone on a rustic lane. An unfamiliar variety of space vessel from another star system lands directly in front of you. No one on Earth but you, Mr. Quayle, sees it. The creatures within are small and helpless, somewhat on the order of field mice. Although they are attempting to invade Earth, tens of thousands of other ships will soon be on their way when this advance party gives the go-ahead signal. And I suppose I stopped them, Quayle says, experiencing a mixture of amusement and disgust. Single-handed, I wiped them out, probably by stepping on them with my foot. No, the psychiatrist said patiently, you halt the invasion, but not by destroying them. Instead, you show them kindness and mercy, and even through or though by telepathy, their mode of communication, you know why they have come. They have seen such humane traits exhibited by any. They have not seen any such humane traits exhibited by any sentient organism, and to show their appreciation, they make you. They make a covenant with you, and they won't invade Earth as long as I'm alive. Yeah, that.
So now they can't even kill him because...
Right, now he has to stay alive.
Exactly.
Right. And then he says, and then McClane, when he's talking to him, he says, this has nothing to do with Mars or inner plan single-handedly stopping an invasion of the Earth from another star system. He shook his head at that. Wow, what a kid dreams up. Not by force, it's sort of quaint. And so, like, they just kind of think it's silly, but it's the idea...
They also think it's really egotistical. One of the guys
the
even...
cop does.
Yeah, the cop is like, this fucking guy.
Yeah.
Do you believe this mook?
Yeah.
I think the story is good. It's, in the short time that you have, there's not a lot to it, but I think it's worthy of the Nebula Award, and just for the launching point that it provided for the movie is reason enough.
Yeah, it makes it worth it just for that. But I don't know, I think the booby part could have been left out. The secretary.
Yo, you mean the fact that she always has different colored body
boobs.
paint on every time he shows up? Yeah, but then I wouldn't have gotten that sweet line where she's like, you're really attractive, so could you not be mean because it makes you less attractive?
Right.
Yeah,
He's married, and she still wants to go out with him.
Oh, Larry, when has that ever stopped people in general?
Well, in general, never. But in stories, usually.
We'll talk about this later.
okay, so overall, we're thumbs up on Total Recall, or we remember it for you wholesale.
We can remember it for you wholesale. I'll give it 1 thumbs up.
1 thumbs up. I'll give it 2 thumbs up. I think it's
I'll do 2 thumbs up.
I like it.
Yeah,
I don't love it.
I've always enjoyed this story though. So
all right, so the movie.
Bum, bum, bum.
Okay, so the history of this movie started in the 70s. Apparently, the film rights were sold to Dan O'Bannon. And Dan O'Bannon, for those of you, he's most famous for having co-written...
Who've lived in a hole?
Yeah.
Watch what you say about Dan O'Bannon.
Yeah, Dan O'Bannon his first project was acting and co-writing Dark Star with John Carpenter.
Yes.
Space surfing.
That is a great movie.
They were film students, and around that time...
David doesn't like Dark Star, Larry.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of Dark Star,
Wow.
but I appreciate
hilarious.
it. I appreciate it. So Dan O'Bannon, around that time, became writing partners with Ronald
Shusett.
Shusett.
Shusett?
We're not sure how to pronounce his name. Please help us.
Please.
Please help us. But they became writing partners, and the first 2 projects they worked on were they bought the film rights from Philip K. Dick directly while he was still alive.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah, and they actually got a chance to talk to him, meet him, according to everything that I've read. So they bought the film rights for We Can Remember It For You wholesale, and they started writing a script, which they called, from the beginning, they called it Total Recall. And at the same time, they were working on the script for Alien. Dan O'Bannon went on to direct Return of the Living Dead, and...
I think Return of the Living Dead is only directorial credit, right?
No, he did a H.P. Lovecraft movie, too.
I
can't remember the title.
Was it The Forbidden? No.
No.
But I've seen the work print of that. I saw it at the H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival. It's actually pretty cool. What the fuck?
It would be amazing if we had something that had all the information in the world at our fingertips.
Yeah, right.
He also wrote Life Force.
Yes, he did write Life Force.
That's right.
So Dan O'Bannon, and I met Dan O'Bannon once at Lovecraft Film Fest, and
Really?
Yeah, either I met him. This is going to sound really silly. I either met him or his wife. I can't remember, but I remember they showed his Lovecraft movie one year, and I know they had some kind of video introduction too, but yeah, he gets lots of film credits for just having created Alien. He did, yes, he did.
Some stories in heavy metal. Blue Thunder.
Blue Thunder was weird.
The Resurrected.
Yeah,
that's the movie. Yeah, that I saw the work print of, which is really interesting. I think it also has Chris Sarandon, who people will know From Fright Night.
Yes. And Invaders from Mars, he wrote the screenplay for that for Tobe Hooper. They did that and Life Force back-to-back for Canon Films, which is kind of cool. Yeah, Dan O'Bannon did a lot of stuff. And
he's well-loved in this group, at least on my end.
Yes, yeah. We really appreciate Dan O'Bannon. And so he was really involved in the production of Total Recall for many, many years. From the 70s, it took till 1990 when the movie came out. However, we're going to argue very vehemently that Total Recall may have been released in 1990, but it's an 80s movie.
Oh, it's 100% an 80s movie.
It's an 80s action movie. It has 80s hair. It has
80s lighting, 80s set dressing,
violence.
80s Ronnie Cox, 80s Arnold Schwarzenegger,
80s Sharon
Michael
Stone.
Ironside.
Yeah. It's a very 80s movie, regardless of the fact that it technically was released
in 90.
In the 90, yeah. It's an 80s movie. But the history of the movie goes back to the 70s, and several directors were connected to it for a long time. The script bounced around. There was many, many drafts of the script done by many people, but the most interesting one that almost happened a few years before the actual movie happened was David Cronenberg was attached to direct it.
Well, and some of the elements actually are in the movie, correct?
Yes.
I think Quayle might be the most David
obvious.
Cronenbergian thing in that movie.
Yeah. So David Cronenberg,
possibly in the world.
Yeah, that's true.
So we're assuming that everybody knows who David Cronenberg is. David Cronenberg is the director of
Scanners, Videodrome, The Brood.
Yeah, at this time, and he was
Naked Lunch.
He was going back and forth between doing The Fly, which he eventually made, and Total Recall, and he actually dropped off of The Fly to do Total Recall, and spent a year working on pre-visualization, concept art, and wrote apparently 12 drafts of the script.
We call that pre-production, David.
Yes. So, yeah, he worked on it for a long time. So somewhere out there's 12 versions of Total Recall written by David Cronenberg.
Wow. Oh, man. If I would love to maybe not see that movie, but at least read the script for it.
No, I like the movie that we ended up with, but there's a part of me that really thinks that I would have... that David Cronenberg making a Total Recall movie would have been my fucking jam.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah. Because...
Well, he hasn't made... is there anything Cronenberg made that is, like, just truly awful?
Dangerous Method. That movie's garbage.
Wait, which movie? Which one is that?
Yeah, that's the one about Freud.
Freud and Jung.
Oh.
Garbage. And I'm not too hip on Cosmopolis either.
Cosmopolis is kind of slow, but...
Garbage.
Yeah. It's not his best. But David Cronenberg is a great filmmaker who's, especially at this time, he was at the peak of his game.
Right.
He did really amazing science fiction with The Fly, and I think he would have brought like a body horror sensibility to this because he was really obsessed with those body issues. And
I mean, it's in full effect in the character of Quayle in this.
Yeah.
Who's definitely not in the short story.
Yeah.
No.
And so David Cronenberg brought to it some concepts that I think that they still kept in the movie, but I think he would have made the whole what is reality thing a little bit more intense. According to everything that I read, that he had wanted Quayle to be played by William Hurt, which is an actor he worked with a couple times.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And that would have been a very different movie. From the one that we got with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Playing not Quayle, but Quaid.
Yeah. All the scripts, by the way, his name is Quayle, just like including the shooting script up until the point that they started filming the movie. The shooting script still said Quayle throughout the script. There's a part of me that wonders that if Cronenberg didn't drop off the project as soon as they said, hey, what about the guy who played the Terminator and Arnold Schwarzenegger? And I assume Cronenberg was like, nah, dog.
Yeah, that's not my jam.
I'm not doing that. Which is exactly what happened when Ridley Scott had been, for years, developing a version of I Am Legend, and he was told that he had to have, the only way that they would make it is if he cast Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he dropped off of that too. So,
and then later they made it with Will Smith.
Right.
All right.
But I would, if I was a director, I'd rather do I Am Legend with Will Smith than Arnold Schwarzenegger. Yeah, well, and then look, I got no problem with Arnold Schwarzenegger. I love Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Will Smith wasn't the problem with that movie.
Yeah. No, all those CGI vampires were, though.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I'm personally, coming into this movie, I love 80s action movies for the sheer stupidity of them, just the fun of it. So I actually enjoy Schwarzenegger movies from this era. I like Schwarzenegger. I don't know about everybody else, but I personally am a huge fan of Conan the Barbarian, the first Terminator, the second Terminator. I like Raw Deal. I personally am a fan of Commando. So I was not turned off by the concept of a Philip K. Dick movie starring Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I'm not turned off by it, but I also saw Total Recall way before I ever got into Philip K. Dick or read the short story, so I have no grounding for that.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I read Philip K. Dick before then. I know I was a junior in high school when this came out, so I remember seeing it in the theater the opening weekend. And I think I went to see it based on the fact that one of the guys that wrote Alien wrote it.
Yeah.
Because they promoted it as from the producers of Alien and the director of RoboCop.
Yeah.
And, of course, Schwarzenegger was already a big star then. He'd already done Terminator, Predator, all that. So,
well, I was 18, and I think I had read Androids, and that's it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I might have read Androids because of Blade Runner for sure. Right. But I don't know that I'd read this story.
That was like, back in the 80s, that was required high school reading if you wanted to be a nerd.
Yeah, well, there was the Del Rey edition of Do Androids Dream Electric Sheep that had Blade Runner on the cover, and
right.
I think a lot of us had that.
We all had that.
Yeah. And assumed that it was a movie first, and then was like, what is this? So, Total Recall, once it got into production, David Cronenberg dropped off, and Arnold had already been trying to work with Paul Verhoeven. He had been close to playing RoboCop. And according to what I read, the reason why they couldn't lock down RoboCop was that they just could not get a costume for big Arnold. I'm dead serious. That
really
is supposedly the reason why.
You are too jacked for this robot suit.
Yeah. Which,
that's a good thing.
Yeah, because Andy Weir, and
Peter Weller?
Peter Weller, not the author of The Martian. Peter Weller, who, by the way, is a professor of history, which is weird. He was great as RoboCop. RoboCop turned out awesome the way that it was. But Arnold wanted to work with Verhoeven again, so when Verhoeven was brought in to do Total Recall, or it may have been Arnold attached to it first. He was attached to it. David Cronenberg dropped off. I think he brought Verhoeven in. What a great combo.
Didn't you tell me that, what's his name? Patrick Swayze was going to be taking the role?
Yeah, briefly after Cronenberg dropped off, Patrick Swayze was attached to the role, which actually I could see a Patrick Swayze in this era because, Patrick Swayze was pretty awesome in Point Break. A year later, he was pretty awesome in Red Dawn.
Well, here's always my problem with Patrick Swayze in action movies, is that when he's doing a fight scene, he still looks like he's dancing.
I think that's just because you've got Dirty Dancing in your head.
I don't think that's the case. You watch him do a kick. He looks like he's about to do a whatever you call it, one of them fancy ballet moves. I will back
Patrick. Well, yeah, if you're talking about Roadhouse, which is not, I think, one of his better action movies, but
ooh, David, you're gonna get hate mail on that one.
Well, no, I'm not saying I don't like Roadhouse. I like Roadhouse. It's just corny, and there's nothing wrong with an action movie being corny. I think
this one is.
Yeah, this one is corny as hell, and I loved it. I think Swayze, if you go back and you watch Red Dawn, which I have recently, Swayze's pretty badass in that movie. And I back Swayze. I think Swayze would have been a good and different Total Recall. And but he's played the big tough guy roles, so he could do it. So once Arnold brought Verhoeven on, the movie went totally fucking bonkers. I mean, and that's one of the things that I think we all appreciated about Total Recall and watching it now is that one of the reasons why it holds up how many years later is because the movie is just totally insane.
Yeah.
If you just look at all the different elements, it has the same core as the short story with the scene with McClane and Quayle. Oh, and we should talk about why they changed the name too. So in the movie, if you're confused because you're like, wait a second, his name is Quaid. In the short story, his name is
Quayle.
Doug Quayle. And at the last minute, after all the scripts were turned in, they changed the name to Quaid. Because at the time in the United States, for all you youngins, we had Vice President Dan Quayle, who
was famous for teaching a child in a classroom on camera how to misspell potatoes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
He was trying to correct the child for spelling potatoes correctly by spelling it incorrectly.
Yeah, Dan Quayle was like mercilessly mocked for being a complete idiot, and he's from my home state of Indiana.
Go Hoosiers.
Yeah, we're super proud of Dan Quayle. They did not want to name his character the same as the idiot vice president at the time.
That makes sense.
So for that reason, we have, instead, we don't have him saying, if I'm not Quayle, then who the hell am I? We have him saying,
right.
If I'm not Quaid, then who the hell am I? And I can't believe we made it this far without me imitating Schwarzenegger.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
And fucking Schwarzenegger is so good in this movie.
Well, we should talk about the first line of the movie, because the first line of the movie is
yeah. Schwarzenegger does his Schwarzenegger in pain scenes so much in this, because if you watch a lot of Schwarzenegger movies, there's always scenes where he's like,
He does a lot of flailing in this movie.
Yeah, he does.
In this movie, there are two things that are really significant. Is there's a ton of Schwarzenegger in pain screams, and there's also a ton of Schwarzenegger getting kicked in the rocks.
Oh, yeah. That's true.
Yeah. Mostly by Sharon Stone. Yeah. She must have really enjoyed that, apparently, because she kicked the shit out of him in the balls throughout the movie. That happens a lot. But let's talk about the differences between the story and the movie. So we have the same basic setup with I want to go to Mars. And Quayle, instead of being a mild-mannered secretary, you can't take one of the...
Well, I think he's a clerk. I don't think he's a secretary.
Yeah, he's a clerk.
He's a clerk. But middle management guy, you can't have him... It would look weird if you have one of the biggest human beings on the planet, a giant muscle man playing
a
clerk.
mousy clerk.
Right. So they
Government
made
clerk.
him a construction worker. Right. And there's a scene of him with his jackhammer, and you get some muscle shots, this still being basically the 80s. I mean, it was filmed in the 80s. Schwarzenegger was still stacked. So you wanted to definitely have some muscle shots. You get that in the beginning with him and Sharon Stone in bed, right off the beginning, and he's dreaming of Mars, which is, very mumuch like the short story. It starts off the same way as the short story. And then he wants to go to Mars. You had the whole scene with Recall with McClure. You got that is all the same, and the setup is basically the same.
Well, except his wife, in quotation marks, is not kind of the angry, shrewdish person that she's made out to be in the short story, because later we find out that his wife isn't his wife. She's a spy.
She's a spy implanted with memories. Yeah, of course. Now, that's the whole thing, is throughout the movie, the what is real thing is really well done, because there's layers upon layers of the conspiracy. Did Quaid implant these memories himself? Did he take these memories from himself? And I think that O'Bannon and Shusett,
Whatever, it doesn't matter.
I think
Someone will inevitably correct us on social media. It's fine.
The writers did a really good job of taking the bare bones of the concept and blowing it out and making it into a very PKD style story, but also combining elements that we've already seen in other PKD works. And once he gets to Mars,
and all structured around a typical 80s style action movie with all the regular action movie tropes.
Yeah, so they really did make two things at once. They made an 80s action movie and a PKD story, and they melded them really well together. They took the concept of the PKD story and then put it into an 80s action.
Yeah, the mutants
concept.
were fantastic.
But one of the major differences is that Quayle does actually go to Mars, and not just at the end.
No, he definitely goes to Mars.
Yeah, he's got to get to Mars, get your ass to Mars. That's what it was. So he does go to Mars, and once he gets to Mars, there's a whole storyline with the colony is dependent on air, which is controlled by
Evil Ronnie Cox.
Evil Ronnie Cox in the Max von Sydow role of this movie. And Ronnie Cox plays like the kind of overarching governor who's controlling everything, and he works for. Does he work for the corporation, or does he run? He's
set the head of the corporation.
He is the corporation,
whatever they're called, the agency
that set up the colony, and and so he's withholding like air and supplies from these mutants. And one of the times where the science was actually close to correct, there was this whole subplot here in the movie about these mutants that have grown up on the colony on Mars, and they've been exposed to so much radiation on the surface of Mars that they have all these kinds of physical disabilities and mutations.
They're also precogs, apparently.
Yeah, and
a lot of them are.
Yeah, and in a very Philip K. Dick way, they are precogs. They can see things and know things, and so that was kind of similar to the world Jones made in little ways.
Right. Well, it's certainly, the people writing it were aware of Phil K. Dick's work.
Yeah. Enough
to know that this would be right in line with his storytelling ideas.
Yeah. And so for those of you who aren't space nerds, Mars, in 1990, our knowledge of Mars was not as vast as it is now. We've got a bunch of robots on the surface of Mars, and we do now know that there is so much radiation on the surface of Mars that it would be practically impossible for human beings to live on the surface of Mars. If we were going to colonize Mars, we'd have to burrow underground and live underground because the radiation is so intense on the surface. So for that reason, that is actually kind of similar, kind of actually good science in a weird way, unintentionally. Now, that being said, it could be explained away that some people are, inoculating themselves, or the people with money have the ability to inoculate themselves on the surface. And
right.
Regardless, anyways, so we have this mutant storyline, and that's really cool because, we definitely like that even though it is not from the story, it has PKD themes. So as DickHeads, we appreciate that. But there's other elements too. I think the way Mars looked in the movie had a real 50s, 60s pulp feel to it.
It looked like the cover of one of those Ace doubles.
Yeah.
That we're so used to seeing Dick's books paired with.
Right. So I think we all really appreciated that aspect of it. And I think that for that, in that way, they were definitely honoring PKD's memory with the way they did the movie. Let's talk about some other aspects of the movie as a movie. Arnold Schwarzenegger overall, how did you guys feel about how Arnie did in this movie?
I thought he actually did this is one of his best performances. He's not much of an actor as it stands, but in this movie, he played two separate parts, and I think he played them different enough, that it mattered. You could tell they were different people.
And there's definitely roles where he's embodied something inhuman. For example, in Terminator, I think he did a great job of being the robot killing machine. Yeah. And he was a great barbarian in Conan. And so he's had performances. Later in his career, I think he's done, he recently did a zombie movie a couple of years ago called Maggie. Yeah, have you seen Maggie?
I have not. It's on my list.
Yeah, he's really good in that. I'm not saying it's a great movie, but it's worth seeing to see Arnold's performance because it is really heartbreaking, like, movie, like, because he brings it. And if he didn't bring it in that performance, it wouldn't work.
Right.
So
Better than Twins?
yeah, not quite as good as Jingle All The Way.
Probably not as good as Junior either.
Right. Oh.
I'm being dead serious when I say Jingle All The Way is his best comedy.
I like Jingle All the Way, so
Yeah.
I've never watched that movie.
So you're the minority report here?
Yep.
Because we both like Jingle All The Way.
it's got Sinbad.
Yeah, dude.
Oh, wow.
And Jake Lloyd.
Oh, my God.
See, now you want to see it, right? Right?
If
Am
I
right?
needed any more reasons not to see it.
No, Jingle All The Way is damn funny. We're not anti-Schwarzenegger here. I think we all liked him in the movie. We think he did a good job.
I'm not. I mean, he's Arnold, right? I grew up with him being in these roles, so he's always going to be Arnold. He's not... And I've never seen him kind of immerse himself in a role to where I felt like I was watching a character more than I was watching Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
But he's much like someone similar to Will Smith. He's charismatic enough and he's endearing. I like spending time with him.
Yeah, and Hauser, who is the... You know, he was Hauser, and then they implanted the Quaid memories in him, which provides the awesome line of, if I'm not Quaid, then who the hell am I? You know, because, look, you have to accept a certain amount of camp with, like, this crazy, huge Austrian guy playing any role besides a crazy, huge Austrian guy.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, when Hauser's on the screen and he's talking to him, you can tell it's kind of a different person. And I think it's a different performance, and, you know, he kind of plays it in a really good way. There's a hilarious scene where Hauser and Ronnie Cox, like, basically high-five each other
Right.
on camera. It's, like, one of the most ridiculous things in the movie, but awesome. And for those who enjoy silly movies, that's a really great scene.
Well, and that's Paul Verhoeven's oeuvre, right? Is just over-the-top craziness.
Well, yeah, but there's all kinds of really cool, smaller performances. We've already talked about Ronnie Cox playing the Max von Sydow villain in the movie, but we have this great short role as the wife by Sharon Stone, and this is pre-Basic Instinct, so Sharon Stone was not a big star at this point, and I think this was a really great eye-opening role for people. And Verhoeven said that he cast her in Basic Instinct because he was watching her on set switch between being loving wife to annoyed, angry spy, like, you know, within seconds, and he really just liked how she shifted between those roles so effortlessly. And he said
she's a great actress. I think people miss that about her. Because of the role in Basic Instinct and stuff like that, is that
But she's good in Basic Instinct.
She's amazing in that movie.
Yeah, and she's a pretty interesting person in general. She was recently on WTF, the Mark Maron podcast, and the interview was really interesting. She talked about her upbringing and stuff, and she's a pretty interesting person.
Right. The David Harbour episode of WTF is really good, too.
Yeah, I haven't heard that one, But yeah, so back to actors that were in Total Recall.
No, I want to turn this into the David Harbour cast.
Other great performances, Michael fucking Ironside as the villain.
The heavy.
Yeah, is awesome.
Yeah, he's great.
He's always awesome, but when he gets to play villains, he's really good at playing scary guy.
I've never seen him not play a villain, though.
In this movie, he's basically the Terminator. I mean, he's just nonstop trying to kill Quaid.
Yeah, and he has some really kind of awesome moments. Like, I think one of his best moments is when the other henchman says something about him. Well, you don't like him sleeping with your lady, and Ironside says, "Are you saying she likes it?" And that line was really delivered awesome. But here's the thing: my first experience with Michael Ironside was him playing a non-villain.
Really?
Yes. He was in my favorite TV show as a kid. There was a miniseries called V that was alien invasion show, and he played a mercenary. I mean, he wasn't like a nice guy, but he played like the Han Solo character of the piece, where he was like a mercenary gunrunner guy who becomes a resistance fighter. Yep. And he's really good at it. Now, here's another Total Recall fact. His sidekick Mickey Jones, who's known for Sons of Anarchy, actually has a brief moment in Total Recall, too, where he's sitting on the train with Arnold Schwarzenegger. So V-nerds, take note, it's a reunion of Ham Tyler, Michael Ironside's character, and his buddy Chris from V in this movie.
I think my first Michael Ironside movie was Scanners.
Yeah, where he blew people up with his mind and you believed it.
Yep.
Yeah. You believed he could, like, actually...
He was capable of that.
Yeah.
So he's basically been balding forever.
Yeah, he's been balding forever. Yeah, even in V. And he was great on V, so I've always loved Michael Ironside. Yeah. And so he was great here. A lot of the minor characters from Benny, the cab driver on Mars with the mutant...
Great performance there.
Yeah, great performance. I didn't really see... He was only in like 2 or 3 other roles, so he didn't really do much else other than that. The mutants were great. Marshall Bell, who's a that guy actor who none of us knew his name until today, who we know as... You knew him as Gordy's dad in Stand By Me.
Yep. I knew him as the coach from A Nightmare on Elm Street 2.
Yeah, he's been in a lot of things. I think I remember him more for Stand By Me. Yeah, because he was a big dick in that role. And
of course this role. I mean, who doesn't remember Quato?
So that whole scene where he reveals that he has Quato as like a mutant within his body is totally body horror. We believe that came from a David Cronenberg draft of the script. However, David Cronenberg did do concept art for a Quato that was like a giant, like Jabba the Hutt type character, too.
With a smaller monster living inside of it, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think they're kind of combining those ideas.
Yeah.
So that was definitely an impact of Cronenberg. And I think a couple of the mutants and stuff like that, I'm assuming some of those came from the Cronenberg era of the development. But Cronenberg was off. I know too that Cronenberg was offered an EP credit, an executive producer credit, and he actually turned it down. Which, whatever. He went on to make The Fly at the same time, so we win because we got the Verhoeven.
Well, the Fly was made in '87, so.
Yes, but he it took that long for
you're talking about the whole
history. He dropped off of Total Recall and went directly to making The Fly. Because he was going to make The Fly.
Fantastic movie.
Yes. He was going to make The Fly, dropped off The Fly to make Total Recall, spent a year in Total Recall, and went back to The Fly.
If you would like to hear more about Cronenberg, check out our Cronencast.
I'm surprised. Is there a David Cronenberg podcast?
There should be.
There has to be, right?
Right?
I kind of want to do Cronenberg.
No, not now.
Nah. Maybe when we finish Dickheads.
Yeah.
But
God, I'll be in my 40s by then.
Yeah, right.
So, any other actors that kind of
stood out
to you guys? No.
What's his name? As the cab driver.
Oh yeah, Robert Picardo.
Robert Picardo.
Yeah, who was the werewolf in The Howling. He was the cowboy in Inner Space, but most people know him as the Doctor on Voyager.
He was also the Doctor in China Beach.
Yeah. So Robert Picardo, they used a mold of his face for Johnny Cab, and he was the voice of Johnny Cab. So kind of neat. At the time, he was not a big actor, so I'm sure it didn't seem like a cameo. Now looking back, it seems like a cameo.
Yeah.
Because he played, a doctor on Star Trek and all that, and he was great on Star Trek Voyager, by the way.
Yes.
He stood out on that show.
The little bit I've seen of Voyager.
Yeah. I watched all of Voyager, and he was great in it, always. Picardo is a great actor. And, Joe Dante used him again and again and again. Just loved him.
Right.
So, and he was started with The Howling. Anyways, so that should be it for actors. But I think all the performances were really good. They filmed the movie in Mexico City. So
as I noted when we were watching it, I really liked the extras for the most part. Normally you're not supposed to notice extras, but I was looking specifically at them, and they were actually reacting properly to the things that were happening. Yeah. And you rarely see that in big movies with so many extras like this.
let's give Verhoeven credit for that,
Yeah.
because that's a big directorial thing. So let's talk next about Paul Verhoeven. At the time, yes, Paul Verhoeven's career started as an art house film director in Europe. He did, his biggest hit was a movie called Flesh and Blood in Europe. I haven't seen much of his art house. I've seen he's gone back to making art house films, and I've seen some of the ones he's made recently, like L. But I haven't seen the early ones. But his entry to Hollywood was a TV show on HBO called The Hitchhiker, which was like a R-rated Twilight Zone.
It was a great show.
Yeah, and he directed several episodes of The Hitchhiker. And then his first big Hollywood movie was RoboCop. And he had not made a science fiction movie up until this point, before he made RoboCop. So in a lot of ways, he was kind of ratcheting up the sci-fi each time he made a sci-fi movie.
Right.
Because he made RoboCop, then Total Recall, then what was Flesh and Blood about? You've got it up on the screen.
Yeah, it's a band of medieval mercenaries take revenge on a noble lord who decides not to pay them by kidnapping the betrothed of the noble's son. There you go.
Now I want to see it.
Right.
Yeah, so so he made
it does star Rutger Hauer.
Yeah,
and Jennifer Jason Leigh, one of my favorite actresses.
Yeah, maybe that was his first Hollywood movie. Maybe I'm wrong about that. So, yeah, now I'm going to try to track that down. And
what other movie had Jennifer Jason Leigh and Rutger Hauer in it? We were talking about it earlier. Anthony?
I don't remember.
It would be The Hitcher.
Oh, yes. Interesting. Yeah, The Hitcher is a great 80s horror movie. And so then he went on to do his next sci-fi movie was he did Basic Instinct and Showgirls, and then he made Starship Troopers. So as far as his sci-fi goes,
that's a great sci-fi trilogy right there.
Yeah, it is.
I don't really care for Starship Troopers.
Really?
But it has Michael Ironside in it.
Yeah,
I love that movie.
He's great in it. Well, you have to go into Starship Troopers knowing that Verhoeven was making a fucking satire. And if you don't go into it with that kind of eye, it's not the same. Which is really funny too, because in a lot of ways he's spoofing the source material, which normally would be something I wouldn't be down for, but in the case of Heinlein's super right-wing short story, Starship Troopers, I think it works.
Yeah. That's what makes that movie great, in my opinion, is the satire. Right.
So, Verhoeven, though, was still an interesting choice for Total Recall because he had never done a movie with that kind of budget and that kind of size. And at the time, Total Recall was the second most expensive movie ever made behind Rambo 3. And the budget was $65 million. So this was a big deal. And so they did a lot of interesting things with the direction. Verhoeven made some interesting choices, filming it in Mexico City, made the sci-fi future look like something that we hadn't kind of seen before because we hadn't seen Mexico City used.
Yeah.
And so I think that actually worked in favor of it. And there was a lot of kind of future cars and in there.
Future
cars. And I liked, Of
course, in the story, they have air cars or whatever you call them.
Right. So, but what I really do like about it is that Minority Report looks really slick with like CGI, design.
Effects.
And even though it was a very expensive movie, Total Recall was working with practical effects throughout, and you have to understand that they filmed it in Mexico, so they didn't have access to, a lot of the toys, and so I think for that reason, I think the movie looks really good, and I think Verhoeven did a great job on that.
Yeah, I think the effects aged well for me. I'm sure someone's going to watch it and say it looks like old goofy shit.
Right.
Yeah, those effects look awesome to me.
Plastic or rubber.
Well, it was interesting because I think this movie was on that site Watch Mojo's list of like top 10 worst special effects in movies.
Really?
And I mean, Watch Mojo don't know what the fuck they're talking about anyway.
That's true.
But I think these effects are still really great.
Just look at Benny's arm when he pulls it out.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Or when
super
when Quaid tries to leave the airport in the suit he's wearing malfunctions.
Right.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you do see like a little bit of proto CGI, but this was almost all practical effects. Rob Bottin, who is known for doing the Alien and the Thing,
The special effects
giant. Yeah, he was a special
Rob
effects
Bottin.
giant, and he did an amazing job. The puppetry with Quato. I read online that there were 15 to 17 puppeteers, depending on the scene. With Quato, the puppetry is great.
Yep.
And you just have to go into it like knowing that it was made in the 80s, basically, and you're not going to get picture perfect special effects, but you know, you're watching a movie from the era, and you have to appreciate that. And I think the special effects were great. Verhoeven brought.
I would say the special effects were better in this movie than they were in Minority Report.
Different. I
Yes.
mean, yeah. Yeah. I mean, technically, the special effects were better in a Minority Report.
No.
I'm more forgiving of the special effects in Total Recall.
But I don't think you have to be forgiving of any of the special effects in Total Recall. They look awesome.
Yeah.
And it's not this sleek, over-computerized bullshit that's in Minority Report. Guys, I'm back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you are.
Yeah. So, but Verhoeven brought a kind of satire sense to it, a comedic sense. He didn't take these movies super seriously. You could tell. But the movies he made before this and the movies he made after this are, you know, very serious. Like The Black Book is like a very serious, like Holocaust.
How dare you say that RoboCop isn't a serious movie?
Well, but you can tell that Paul Verhoeven has his tongue kind of planted in his cheek in this sci-fi trilogy.
Sure.
And that's
But I
fine.
think they were meant to be taken, at least RoboCop I think is a more serious movie than Total Recall. But we don't have to get into a discussion about RoboCop on a Philip K. Dick podcast.
Right.
That's fine.
Yeah. Well, there's influences, but, you know, I think Verhoeven, you can't really argue that he didn't have his tongue somewhat in his cheek. I mean, some of the ways...
I'm not arguing that, but I will argue that I don't think that Total Recall or RoboCop are necessarily just dumb fun movies.
No, they have serious moments, and
There's some great... Yeah, there's some great moments. In the scene where, I forget the character's name, where he tries to come back and convince Quaid that he's still dreaming. And only...
Well,
That is a very good dramatic scene.
We'll talk about... That is definitely the best scene of the movie. Do you guys agree?
From a writing standpoint?
From a storytelling
standpoint, yes.
Yes. Yeah.
So the scene we're talking about, there's a scene...
But I really love the Quato reveal.
Yeah, the Quato reveal is good too, but I think from a storytelling perspective, and we're talking about Verhoeven right now, so it fits. A really well-directed scene that shows, like, that they're doing something that kind of outstretches the boundaries of a dumb action movie is a scene where they basically set up where somebody comes from recall and basically tries to convince them, no, this is not happening. This is all fake. You're dreaming this. This isn't real. And it's a very intense moment. Arnold plays the scene great because you can tell, like, Arnold plays it as, I'm not sure what's happening.
Yeah.
Right? And, you know, his wife's there and they say, no, you're just dreaming this. You're sitting at recall. None of this is real. And
it's got like a really Hitchcockian sort of tension to it.
Right.
It's such an intense moment when he's got the pill in his mouth and the people are just waiting for him to swallow the pill. And
Yeah, so they hand him a pill and they say, a red pill, and this is 9 years before The Matrix. They hand him a red pill and they say, like, if you take this, it'll all be over. You'll wake up, you know. And he puts the pill in his mouth and there's a very tense moment where he's kind of looking at it. puts it in his mouth, and right after he puts it in his mouth, he looks at the guy from Recall, and he sees one bead of sweat roll down his face, and he knows, wait, I'm not dreaming this. That's real.
And he straight up shoots him in the head.
Right in the head.
Right.
So good.
Yeah, and that is definitely the best. To me, that's the best scene in the movie. I never thought that was the best scene in the movie until I watched it today.
Right.
And so when I was younger, I don't know what I would have thought was the best scene in the movie. Probably something with Michael Ironside.
Yeah, when his arms get chopped off by the elevator.
That was pretty good. Yeah. Although, when his arms get chopped off of the elevator, he did not say, "Let me give you a hand."
Right.
I know.
Yeah.
But you didn't write the script, David, so...
I just don't understand how Arnold didn't say that. Maybe he did, and Verhoeven
said, no.
Because
None
he
of
had
that.
already
this,
had
this one time.
he already gave him the shooting Sharon Stone and saying, "Consider it a divorce."
Oh, man.
And which, by the way, like just when he was pointing the gun at him, I was already laughing, but knowing that it was coming. But that scene with the sweat, that's definitely like the best of the scenes in Total Recall. And
the other thing that scene reminds me of is I think it's Twilight Zone episode, the Roald Dahl episode where the guy has to light his lighter 10 times in a row or something like that. It has that kind of tension to it.
Yeah.
Very classic type of scene.
So we also thought another scene that Verhoeven just totally nailed was the reveal of Quato.
Oh yeah,
Anthony,
It's awesome. You
was-
want me to talk about the reveal of Quato?
we thought so the reveal that Quato is a mutant inside the body of Marshall Bell, who we've already been walking around with Marshall Bell, so the idea that Quato has been there all along and been part of
and it's
the
built
action.
up. It's built up for us to believe that he is Quato.
Yeah.
Right.
So the reveal has that much more impact when you find out, yes, it is him, but it's also totally not him.
Yeah, and he lifts up he opens the shirt, lifts it up, Quato jumps out, puppet. It's a great special effect.
The mouth movement was so dead on.
Yeah.
I thought that was incredible that they did that with the puppet. It must have had like 5-6 mechanisms just to work the mouth.
Well, considering there was 15 to 17 puppeteers, I'm sure a lot of that was just in the mouth.
Yeah.
So, great puppeteer work, just really good scene. Verhoeven also, just did over top of the violence. Schwarzenegger using thugs as a human shield and then throwing them down on the escalator
Right.
was just kind of crazy and over the top and awesome.
The scientists trying to fight off Arnold Schwarzenegger when they tried to reprogram him.
When they shot him, they put the shot in his leg 40 times.
Yeah.
All that stuff was great. Verhoeven really embraced the idea of the 80s action movie aspect of it.
And that scanner scene still is one of my favorite things in the whole movie.
When they put him in the machine
when he's running through the scanner and you see the skeleton.
It's a visual gag that totally works.
Yeah.
And apparently
and the head coming off of the costume that he's wearing.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
Yeah. There's all kinds of moments in there. So, yeah, we obviously appreciated Total Recall in a way that we did not appreciate Minority Report.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So,
But it still had ads all over the place.
Yes. So just like Minority Report,
Larry's always going to be there to count the ads. It was not nearly as overbearing as Minority Report.
Right, exactly. But that's the problem with Spielberg doing ads is that he does sort of draw.
Yeah, but Larry,
focus
don't you
to them.
remember Spielberg didn't get paid?
Oh yeah, right.
Vomit.
I'm sure he lost money on that.
Yeah, I feel so bad for him.
whatever. Anyways, so one thing that's interesting is that apparently, and I read this in trivia, is that Pepsi is the official soft drink of Mars, and that you will see Pepsi signs on Mars, but on Earth you see Coca-Cola signs.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, that's this is at the time of the the Cola Wars. So
yeah. This was around the time
I was there. I lived through the Cola Wars.
when Bill Cosby was introducing New Coke. Mm-hmm. Which
wait, was that a real thing? Is that a real thing that happened? The Cola Wars?
The Cola Wars.
Yeah. And Bill Cosby was the spokesperson for Coke when they decided to release this new formula. Mm-hmm. That was like they changed the way Coke tasted, and it was fucking garbage, and it was really bad. And
so then, who was the representative for Pepsi? Who was their spokesperson?
Well, it wasn't Harvey Weinstein, but it would be
whoa.
But you know what Pepsi did?
What?
They had a caffeine-free drink called Pepsi Free, which was interesting because that's an important thing because Pepsi Free only existed for 2 years, but it was long enough that there was a line in Back to the Future where Marty McFly orders a Pepsi Free in the 50s, and the guy says, if you want a Pepsi, you gotta pay for it, kid. And that joke is totally lost to history now because
Pepsi Free didn't last.
Pepsi Free only lasted for 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm sure everyone's riveted with our Cola Wars stuff. Next on the Cola Wars.
Episode 8, the Cola Wars.
But, yeah, we'll make sure to put a tag on there because maybe somebody will find us just because they want to hear
Yeah, they want to hear about the Cola Wars.
I'm kind of really interested in this, to be quite honest with you. Moving along.
Well, yeah, so Total Recall. Yeah, the design was great. The special effects we liked. Overall, like, there isn't really anything that made me dislike the movie.
Right.
Overall,
I mean,
you have to look at it for its time.
It's super cheesy.
I think the set on Mars, the section, was it Section G,
Yeah.
kind of is pretty goofy. It looks like a Universal Studios backlot
It's very
set.
small.
It does look like a
looking.
soundstage.
Yeah, it very much feels like a soundstage, but that's fine. It adds to the charm of the movie for me.
Yeah. I mean, but if you think about it, if you were building a colony on Mars, it's probably not going to be huge.
Probably not.
You're probably going to have a very small space.
But they had enough space to have a tattoo parlor and a porn, video joint and a bar with hookers. So
Larry makes a good point.
Priorities, apparently,
right.
for your Mars colony. Well, they have lots of workers and,
workers need hookers and booze.
Right.
I mean, that's true.
Because they have to mine the McGufferians or
Whatever it is, the
McGuffite.
The unobtainium.
Yeah, because just like every science fiction movie now, there's a McGuffite that you have to...
Vibranium.
Or,
Exactly.
Unobtainium. God, I hate that movie.
Yeah, and this one it was like Librarian or something. Like, I don't know.
Librarian.
It was with an L. I don't know.
Right.
In my mind, it was just McGuffite. So,
I didn't really pay attention to what it was actually called.
Yeah, there was some kind of fuel or resource they needed, and in order to, they had to mine it, and if they released all the water, which would create an atmosphere on Mars, apparently, that was breathable for humans. That was the other thing. We forgot about that. There was this ancient Martian storyline.
That really only comes out during the Quato reveal in the last 20 minutes of the movie.
Yeah, so there was this kind of ancient aliens thing you can cue in your mind, seeing the guy with the crazy hair from Ancient Aliens.
Yeah.
This was the least PKD part. I don't recall him ever doing an Ancient Aliens on Mars thing. But...
I don't either.
No, because he always had Mars being a lush tropical place.
colony. Yeah.
Except for, World Jones made, all the planets were shitty.
Yeah. But, so I think that was really kind of a weird kind of throwaway thing at the end, and you had to have some kind of big, ticking clock down to, how James Bond always has the bomb that he has to stop at the end, and that's kind of what was going on in the end of Total Recall with the alien storyline.
That was kind of the weakest part.
Yeah, it was definitely the weakest part of the story. It wasn't needed.
Now is the least interesting part of the story for me.
If it had all climaxed on that scene with the video of Ronnie Cox and Arnold like hooping it up, having a party, like
High-fiving.
where he reveals that he betrayed himself, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
And if it had ended in kind of like a big action scene with a shootout there, I think it would have been a little bit stronger.
But then we wouldn't get that sweet scene where everybody falls out of the windows and Ronnie Cox hella dies.
Yeah, but Arnold
Hella
and his girlfriend like go right back to normal as soon as like
There have got to be physical repercussions of going through that.
and that's
I'm telling
wackadoo
you guys,
science
it's not true.
It's also wackadoo science to imagine that you could terraform a planet in like 2 minutes.
Fair.
Yeah,
Yeah.
with an icicle.
With a glacier.
Fair.
So that is pretty dumb science.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it's a dumb 80s action movie, and we don't want to think about it too much. But so, final thoughts on Total Recall.
I loved it.
Yeah, I thought I love the story, and I love what they did to make the story into a movie.
I agree.
I think one helps the other both ways.
Yeah, it makes it a better short story when you have the movie in your head, and and obviously the movie wouldn't exist without the short story. So like they both make each other better. And
Right.
And now here comes the big question: is imagining PKD watching this, because he took himself pretty seriously, right?
He did.
He took himself very seriously, and I don't know how he would handle watching this story turned into an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie.
But here's the thing about it: is the story itself is a long joke
yeah.
that he's telling. So there has to be a lighter side to Philip K. Dick, right?
Yeah, that's true. And
I mean, he wasn't trying to instill some great message with this one.
And I think he would have just, at this point, there hadn't been there had just been Blade Runner, really, and maybe, I'm not sure what else.
I'm not sure what, yeah.
Yeah, so I think he probably would have just been stoked that there was another movie.
Right.
Bringing attention to his work. And I think he probably would have tried, if he was like doing interviews or whatever, he probably would have tried to sell,
Yeah, I think he would have been publicly supportive, and maybe two decades later we'd find some interview where he low-key didn't like a lot of things about it.
But I
Right.
think he would have liked what they did with Mars.
Yeah.
Yeah,
think he
I
really
just
would
think
have
some of
liked
the
the mutants.
goofier elements of it
Yeah.
he probably wouldn't have liked.
True.
Like the ancient aliens
Right.
thing kind of shoehorned in at the end.
Yeah. And I do think since Dan O'Bannon and Sushit, I'm going to get it wrong every time. Sushit. They definitely had reached out to PKD. They had somewhat of a relationship with him, so I think they probably would have talked along the way. They stayed involved as producers right up until the end. And we do know that the last thing that we know is that he appreciated Blade Runner, even though there was massive changes to that.
Right.
And I just found out recently, too, by the way, that Ridley Scott admitted in an interview that he made a mistake of telling Dick that he didn't finish the novel, that he couldn't.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
And so the reason why Ridley Scott hosted PKD to come see footage was to kind of try and mend bridges and say, like,
Well, who gives a shit about Ridley Scott now? He made Alien Covenant and Prometheus, so
Right.
no one cares.
He's dead to me.
Dead. Dead.
Anyways,
Garbage.
I'm looking at Dan O'Bannon's IMDb page. He also did the screenplay for Screamers.
Mm-hmm.
I was not
that's
aware
right.
of that.
I think he also write this kind of low budget movie called Bleeders.
There's Bloodbath.
No, but there's Bloodbath.
So he must have owned the rights to two different PKD stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to his wife is doing a lot to keep his memory alive. Maybe we might wanna consider.
I think Dan O'Bannon, although revered and around guys like us who love genre, is kind of an underappreciated screenwriter.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and he did a lot of really smart things, and if you think about it too, like he adapted Life Force, and Life Force was a really like kind of obscure novel. The novel was based on space vampires,
Mm-hmm.
which
Sure is.
Hey, it's actually
Hey, that comes through in the movie.
Dude, I love Life Force, so I'm
Okay.
not hating.
the first half of that novel is fantastic. The second half is kind of but I feel the same way about the movie, but with Life Force. But
You know what would have been cool to do, you guys, which I can't believe I'm just thinking of it now,
What?
is we should have reached out to Dan O'Bannon's wife to talk about him writing Total Recall.
well, we could still do that.
Yeah.
So
That would be cool.
yeah.
Since we have Screamers coming up at some point.
Oh, yeah. That's
we're
true.
going to do Screamers next, so we're doing back-to-back O'Bannons.
Oh, I like it.
Yeah, that was
I
unintentional.
know there's a reason we're all friends.
Yeah, I think PKD would have liked this film overall. I don't think he would have thought it was perfect, but I think he would have dug this.
I think he would have liked parts of it,
Yeah,
and then other things maybe not so much.
he would have liked it better than the 2012 version, I suspect. But
I can't wait till we get to the Adjustment Bureau, because I haven't seen it.
we could do we could do that one after Screamers. So, Total Recall overall, big thumbs up.
Yeah, how many Mars mutants are you going to give it?
How many Venusian babies am I going to give it?
No, we're giving Mars Mutants.
Mars Mutants?
I'm going to give it 5.
Well, Mars precog mutants.
Oh my god, this is getting too complicated. I give it 5 out of 5 Mars Mutants.
Wow.
5 out of 5 Mars Mutants for me too.
Wow. I would give a movie like this 3 stars or 3 mutants normally, but there's a huge nostalgia factor here, and it's so much fun to watch that I have to give it 4 Mars precog mutants.
I'm going to give it 5 for the simple fact that I can watch this movie like 100 times
Yeah.
and still be entertained by
I
it.
technically watched this movie twice in one day. So,
to do this podcast.
to do
yeah.
this podcast, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm going to have to give it 5. As a PKD adaptation, I'd give it 3 out of 5.
That
but
sounds fair.
but
I'd give it
as-
maybe a 2.5 out of 5 as an adaptation.
Really?
But there's not that it's bad. There's just not a whole lot to work with a short story.
Yeah.
I'd give it 3 because it built on themes that he did elsewhere in his work. So I would definitely give it 3 out of 5 for adaptation.
And it does take on all the elements that except for the alien. Well, no. I mean, there's an alien part, but it's not an alien invasion.
So
That's
in the
not in
story.
there.
Yeah.
But Quayle did go to Mars and kill a major leader,
Yeah.
There.
His name was probably Quado.
right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, in that sense, like, I think...
I don't know. I thought it was a brilliant adaptation. I would give it 4 stars
For adaptation.
for adaptation.
Okay. Well, that sounds about it for Total Recall.
This Total Recall, because it was remade, and we're gonna watch it.
For reasons.
We're gonna watch it, you guys.
Oh, we are. It'll be the first time I've ever seen it.
Yeah, it'll be the first time I've ever seen it, too.
Wait, what?
Yeah,
I'm the only one here who's seen that?
I was scared away.
Yeah. Are you happy that you've seen it?
No.
Oh, okay.
But I feel that way about a lot of movies I watch. Oh, then you guys are in for a treat.
Yeah, well, once we decided we were going to watch it for this, then I purposely decided not to watch it.
Yeah,
So-
we'll watch it the closer we get.
Yeah.
So-
yeah, me too.
So what are we doing next time, David?
Our next episode is The Man Who Japed, which you've read and I haven't read, so why don't you give us a little preview of The Man Who Japed?
So, The Man Who Japed.
I'm starting reading it as soon as I finish this big honkin' Stephen King book that I'm reading.
So just to get everybody prepped, The Man Who Japed, and assuming this Mariner edition does not lie to everyone again, much like the world Jones made.
Probably does.
Yeah, and I think it definitely does, if I remember this book correctly. Following a devastating nuclear war, the moral reclamation government took over the world and forced its citizens to live by strictly puritanical rules. No premarital sex, drunkenness, or displaying of neon signs. Oh, what a weird law.
Neon signs.
All of which are reinforced through a constant barrage of public messages. The chief purveyor of these messages is Alan Purcell, next in line to become head of the Propaganda Bureau. But there is just one problem. A statue of the government's founder has been vandalized, and the head is hidden in Purcell's closet. In this buttoned-up society, maybe all a revolution needs is one really great prank. Wah, wah, wah. You know, I read this back cover before I read it, and I thought, this is going to be dumb. But if I remember correctly, I kind of liked this one a little bit more than Jones.
Yeah, I can't wait to read it. So
I probably have 2 more days of reading this new Stephen King book, The Outsider, and then I'm going to start World Jones.
how many pages is that book?
Well,
4,000?
Stand by. No, it'll just feel like 4,000.
No,
100 and
No, the Stephen King one.
You
Oh, the Stephen King one is 561 pages.
100 million billion words.
Way too many.
300 of which you probably don't need.
Yeah,
If anyone's interested, the first 200 pages of The Outsider is very good. And then I'm not so sure now. But we'll see.
Well, catch us up on the next episode, David, on whether or not it was good.
Yeah, because...
Yeah, that sounds good.
Well, you know, there is a podcast much like ours for Stephen King called The Losers Club, which I've been really enjoying.
That's a good title.
Yeah, I've gotten through The Stand on that podcast. But it's been actually, you know, people who might be interested, our listeners, because it's a similar format. Okay, dickheads, please read The Man Who Japed with us and come back next time. And
Don't forget to hit us up on Twitters and Facebooks and
we're on the Instagrams, the Twitters. We love.
Oh yeah, so we never have done that before, but you can find us at DickHeads Pod, right, David?
On Twitter
and Instagram.
Yep.
And you can find me at AnthonyT697 on Instagram and Twitter, or on Facebook, even though I'm not really on there anymore.
Yeah,
often.
I'm on Twitter at D Agranoff, AGRANOFF author on Twitter, and if you follow us on Dickheads, you're getting all the super relevant stuff. But of course, if you want to find out about our other works,
David's being lazy. You can follow him on Instagram at count.agranoff.
Yeah,
so I'll do it for him, for God's sake.
Yeah, and before the next episode, I have a book being released that both these two gentlemen helped me on. Hey, I'm giving you credit. You guys were both involved in helping me finish this book, and it's a book called Ring of Fire, and it's already up for pre-sale on Amazon, but by the time this comes out, it'll probably be for sale very soon.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Larry.
It's not PKD influenced at all. Sorry.
Where can people find you?
I'm usually at my house.
Okay,
and,
what's your address?
And sometimes I go to the store.
He's not going to give up his
can
social
find me.
media.
Yeah. I tag Larry all the time on
He's
our
at
posts.
Beating My Heads on Twitter.
So if you want to add
that too.
him with some questions, or if he said something that offended you in his analysis of this movie, then you can add
Or
him.
if I've offended you on anything, feel free to.
Annoy him.
Yeah.
And he
haunt me.
probably won't care if you're upset. All right, I've been Anthony Trevino.
I've been David Agranoff.
I'm Langhorne J. Tweed.
All right, see you later, dickheads.
Paranoid.
Keep it paranoid.
Yeah. Carry on being paranoid.